Now, I also see that you had worked during the 50s for several recording studios in New York City, notably Coastal Recording and Fulton Recording Studios. Were these studios that specialized in anything in particular, or were they general purpose recording facilities?
By the 1950s, there was a growth of recording studios. Recording studios really didn't exist prior to the 50s. There were transcription houses, and the radio stations used to have recorders in recording facility in the station so that they could transcribe or downfeed the shows that the networks were feeding. I mean, the man in Alabama or the man in Jackson, Mississippi might get a line feed of Ma Perkins or Young Witter Brown or something like that, and he's not going to put it on the air at that time because it's not convenient to the audience that they attract. So he would record it on a transcription and then rebroadcast it at a later date. So they had this limited recording facility. Coastal Broadcasting was a station in New York, WHOM. WHOM was an AM/FM affiliate in New York, and the AM station was catering to like a racetrack market jazz program, informal type thing, where the FM was broadcasting in about 6 or 7 languages a day. They were broadcasting an hour in Chinese, 2 hours in German, 3 hours in Spanish, and then so forth and so on. And this was WHOM. They also had live programs coming out of their facilities, but with that 1948 musician strike, when it was settled, the radio stations no longer employed musicians. Disc jockeys were invented because radio stations could replace a 6-piece band with one disc jockey in a phone booth with a turntable, and he could play music 24 hours a day, and they're saving all this money. So all of a sudden, radio stations have this real estate that they don't know what to do with. This was Coastal Recording.
Now, I also noticed that in the 50s, and I assume this would be the mid-50s, that you started working part-time for Atlantic Records. Is that accurate, or?
Actually, when I was at that first job in Carl Fisher, later to be named Apex, with the threat of the record strike looming in 1947, I did the first Atlantic record date with Herb Abramson, Miriam Abramson, and Ahmet Ertegun. And that was in 1947, and I did 2 or 3 dates for them then. Then after the strike, they used me, or they used Al Schmidt for a couple of recording dates here and there. And as I say, I went to the USIA. They called me up there and said, can you record tonight, or can you make acetates for us? Because they had in their facility an inexpensive turntable and a cutter head system, and they'd ask me to listen and determine which is the best take, what do you think, this and so forth and so on. So I was perpetually on call to Atlantic Records when they were going to record. Can you be here, or can we go, what studio are you working in, can we use the studio to record in, et cetera, et cetera. So I was in touch with Atlantic from day one in 1947 until the mid-50s, when finally there were 2 things that led to it. One, there was enough work there now that they wanted me to work for them exclusively. Number 2, Atlantic had turned the corner and become a very successful, small, compact operation. I'll name 3 records that you don't realize the originals were made by Atlantic Records. Shake, Rattle, and Roll by Joe Turner was copied by Bill Haley. Tweedledee by Laverne Baker was copied by Georgia Gibbs. Shaboom by the Chords was copied. Okay? I was getting calls when Atlantic would make a record and the record came out and it looked like it was going to be a crossover hit and go from the R&B market into the white market. I would get the call to do the same record for the other company because they wanted me to do it because I knew how to make it sound.
Make it sound that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
can understand that. Now, I noticed that by 1954 you joined Atlantic full-time, as you mentioned, and in 1956 the Atlantic offices moved somewhere. I assume that was in New York City, is that correct?
We moved from 56th Street. They moved the offices from 56th Street to 57th Street. The reason being, on the 4th floor of the building we were in, they gave the entire 4th floor to the stock room for mailing out the DJs and the pre-test samples and so forth and so on. And they gave me the entire 5th floor to make it a bigger studio and have our own mastering and echo chambers and so forth.
Right. Now, that was very interesting to me because was it common at that time for record labels to actually have their own hardware in studios and have the whole ball of wax as far as manufacturing product?
No, it was not common for the labels. Most of the labels were overnight or tent operations where they'd open up an office, run a year, and then disappear, and the assets were in the man's pocket, and the copyrights were in a file drawer, and everything else was in litigation. There were a handful of record companies. Chess was on the same trail. Cameo Parkway was on the same trail. They might have some facility in a garage space or something like that.
Right.
Where they had, what was the other? Regal Records out in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I forgot to even mention them. But I did a lot of recording for Regal on weekends. Where they had a warehouse space, and when the industrial noise was down on the weekend, you put up 3 or 4 microphones and you'd record on a portable tape machine, and then you take it back someplace and master it and figure out what to do with it.
And make sure you know what the train schedule is for the
Yeah,
day, right?
exactly. Don't open the window, here it comes the truck, you know, like.